Thanks for being with us with Shaun, Starr, and Marco D'Amico as we dive into the Montreal Canadiens as we get closer to the March 7th NHL trade deadline. And, the other interesting angle as we talk about what we believe the Montreal Canadiens are ultimately going to do, which
Mhm.
I find very interesting. And I take us back to the piece that you wrote for RG. And here it is: Jake Evans. Will they? Won't they? Is the headline. And I find this so fascinating to see what ultimately they're going to do here, about
Mhm.
what some of your sources are telling RG, that no surprise that the Canadiens have been on the other end of calls from several NHL clubs looking at Jake Evans, looking at Yoel Armia, David Savard, and even, surprise, surprise, defenseman Mike Matheson, as you write about here, with each of those players bringing something different to the
Mhm.
table, and both appeal to various clubs for various reasons. So,
Mhm.
is there anything further to Jake Evans, his camp, and whether or not there is common ground to be found between the Montreal Canadiens and Jake Evans, or is it more likely that a trade is on deck?
Basically, I'm not going to lie and say I have knowledge of the contract negotiations. I don't.
Yeah,
And that is a credit to Ken Hughes. He does not let that stuff get out. What we do know is that it's a stickler on term. And it always is when it comes to stuff like this.
for sure.
So it's a question of, will the Canadians go or be willing to go beyond 3 years? And I feel like anybody who's watched the last couple of games and seeing the way that Owen Beck plays,
Oh, oh, oh.
yeah, it's
I like it. Mm-hmm.
well, so this is the thing, and I think a lot of people need, like when you're bringing up these kids at this time of the year, you're
Yeah.
testing them. You're testing them good. And we saw Logan Mailloux playing on the what I thought was the top pair the other day, and I thought he did really well next to Lane Hutson.
Agreed.
Sure, they had a
Agreed.
goal against, but to me, you're facing the New Jersey Devil. Like Jack Hughes uh, can mesmerize, and they still
Yes.
were able to play him hard, and I like that. And I think the Canadian staff likes that because they're trying to figure out whether or not Mayu can finish the season with the Montreal Canadiens, because the Laval Rocket don't seem to miss him right now, right?
My
Like
gosh. My gosh.
they Adam Engstrom has no problem taking over those
Correct.
responsibilities and sliding over to the right side. David Reinbacher is coming back, so that could fill the gap, and then Logan Mailloux could finish the season in Montreal should they trade David Savard. So
Yeah.
these youngsters are answering questions for the Canadians as they get close. But when you look at a guy like Jake Evans, what I've been told, because I stress this, I do not have knowledge of their of the negotiations, and anybody who does is probably getting it secondhand.
Right.
What we do know is that this is not going to be something that the Canadians are going to let go beyond March 7th. So there is the expectation that either he is signed by March 7th or they're going to have to make a move. And I think that's the key here. The Canadians are asking for at least a second round pick. I believe it'll be a second and a prospect,
Yeah.
or you just a bigger name prospect. But that
Oh,
seems to be the intent. And from what I've heard as of the last 24 hours, obviously, one of the teams that's very interested in him is the Florida Panthers, and another
mm.
team, understandably, that is interested in him are the LA Kings. And
Yeah. Two
that's
teams positioned, well positioned, right?
but also familiarity in the
Yeah.
in the
Right.
case of the
Right.
LA Kings, with Phil Deneau already being there, and we all know the combination of how good the defensive combination of having a 1-2 on your bottom six of Phil Deneau and Jake Evans has been in the past.
And, you write about here, and I'm going to highlight it on the screen for people to see. Um, as it relates to Evans at rg.org, there's no way this goes beyond the deadline, as you mentioned,
I don't feel it.
and
No.
the Canadians will lose their leverage if they don't have a resolution with Jake Evans before that trade deadline. Do you see it? Do you see this situation as it being tilted in favor of the Canadians with leverage, that they have this asset? And one of the other things I saw floated out there this week, and you write about it here when you talk about Yoel Armia getting some attention. I love Yoel Armia's game. I think he had a good weekend. I
Mm-hmm.
like that he's not a flyby guy. When they forecheck, man, he finishes his hits more often than not. I really like the way he plays, and I think I'm anxious to see him play for Finland at the Four Nations, but One of the other
Oh
things I
well.
saw floated out there this week was the possibility of Evans and Armia in a package deal to a team
Hmm.
that could. I mean, to me, it sounds brilliant because
Hmm.
you're getting two players that have chemistry, two players that work hard, are very good at goal prevention, and it allows two guys that come in and.
Hmm.
I would think the transition, Marco, into a new team for Evans and Armia in this hypothetical package deal um, could be a home run. Do you see it that way? That would it would be better to package them than to sell them individually?
Depends what the it always depends what the return is. But I
Like
would
I think
like to
they can
give
get a first round pick. I think they can get another first
yes,
round pick. You?
yes. But is that really what they need?
Yes. No?
No,
Three
I
first rounders?
I don't believe so personally. Well,
Okay.
again, the asset value, yes, yes, a
Yes.
first round pick would be fine.
Yep.
Before I do continue with this, I would like to give credit where credit is due. There's a fantastic suggestion by Arpan Basu of the Athletic when it comes to that package concept because you are not just trading one or the other; you're trading the best PK duo in the
Oh,
NHL right now.
fact. Fact.
So, would it be a first round pick? I think it would be a first round pick plus if the two were traded together
Yeah.
at this junction, especially considering that if Armia is traded, there will probably be some like there would either the Canadians would take back salary or there would be retention in this situation, right? So that you would trade if you would retain on Armia's contract, he makes 3.4 million right now. You retain 50%. He's at 1.7. Ironically enough, Jake Evans is at 1.7. Put them together and it's 3.4 million. Now
Huh.
they would only count at 3.4 million on a team that's using LTIR. If the team is under the salary cap, well, then it would be the prorated amount of their 3.4 million combined. So if we get to
Gotcha.
the NHL trade deadline, I believe there would only be 18 to 20 games. So let's call it a quarter of their value. So a quarter of 3.4 million is roughly 850,000 for the
Wow.
best PK duo in
Wow.
the NHL.
How do you not run to make that deal? Like,
So there's value in that. And again, this is why I state this. It was a brilliant suggestion by Arpan Basu. And when you start doing the math, it even makes more sense. And again, this all stems on the idea that if this is it, this is a big if the
yeah.
Canadians cannot get a deal signed with Jake Evans, because I feel like the Canadians feel they have Armia's replacement in Emil Heineman, who's same size, same kind of size. I could believe he's 6'2" instead of six
Yep.
three or 6'4",
Yep.
but he has the speed that they like, the shot, and he could play that PK. So I think Emil Heineman, as they're building for the future, is a guy that they can slot into that bottom six, and they can feel comfortable. And you have a guy like Owen Beck coming, Oliver Kapanen also kind of can play that two-way style. So they have the guys. The Canadians don't lack bottom six players. In fact, in terms of
Right.
prospects, in fact, it's quite the opposite. It's the other way around. And so when you look to build that way, at least you have now you're showing the assurance that Owen Beck could probably fill that role. Emil Heineman has proven they could fill that role. So they have the assurance to go out and say, hey, and I think we were talking about leverage before. I think that's where it comes to. Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon can tell Jake Evans' camp, hey, you want to be here, we want you to be here, and we know that that is a confirmation. Both sides would like to end this with a deal in Montreal.
Yeah.
But in Jake Evans' situation with the salary cap numbers that we just saw go up, next year is 95.5 million, and the
Yep.
year after that is like what 108, something
And
like
then
that. So
113. Yeah.
so sorry, so 104 and then 113.
Exactly.
So you're Jake Evans. This is it. This is your
This is it.
last cash out. You
Correct.
can't afford to fumble this. And so the Canadians have the leverage right now where they can say, we would like to keep you, but if you don't sign, we have to trade you. And that puts pressure on his cap to get a deal done or embrace the idea that he's going to go in and bet on himself and go to a
Right.
contending team and produce and perform to the excellence that he does down the stretch and in the playoffs as we've seen in the past and then cash out in the summer.
Yeah,
That is
you know, I don't see a world where 3 years and Jake if Evans really wants to stay here and says, "Fine, I don't wanna leave, married, I got I'm set up
but
here in Montreal," I 3 I mean, you can't fall in love with bottom 6 guys. The timing in my mind just doesn't
so
work.
I like that you bring that up because there is a video, and for all the fans that want to double check this, go
Yeah,
right ahead. But there is a video in the lead up to the 2022 NHL draft. The Canadians do this every year where they recap the draft and show you the conversations that are having in the back room.
Yeah.
You do not fall in love with the bottom six player early unless the talent is also there.
Got you.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the key, is that
Yes.
when the Canadians are going to get to a point where they're going to need bottom six players and they're going to need that kind of experience, they're going to have it. My concern, my concern is, will they, what will they do to end the season and what will next season look like? Because I just cannot see a center line where you have Nick Suzuki, Kirby Doc, Owen Beck, and Oliver Kapanen, say, as your 1, 2, 3, 4. Like there's a complete lack of experience and they're all right shot centers.
Yeah.
Like I just,
Yeah.
there's an experience and a logistical issue. They can't only have Alex Newhook as a person that could take left side faceoffs.
That's a great point. It's a great point.